Hi guys, it's Beth. Welcome to my channel, Bourbon Creek Crafts. Back in July, I worked through this vintage Christmas pad from My Mind's Eye. And I finished it off in July, but there was one project that, I'd used all the paper in July, but there was one project I just hadn't finished yet. And I will talk about that here a little bit more in just a minute. But this was a gorgeous pad, lots of gorgeous vintage patterns. And I did end up with a bunch extra of this pattern here. And I think they came from Hobby Lobby, but I'm not sure, in one of their miscellaneous or in some of their miscellaneous paper packs. So I had a bunch of this pattern in the individual sheets, and they were actually double-sided. So you're going to probably see this pattern a lot throughout my projects, but I think that was the only extra pattern I had. But then I had probably most of I would say I had 3/4 of the pad left. So I did a couple big projects and then some smaller projects to use up the rest. So let's go through what I did make. I started off the month of July using Call Me Crafty Owl's July 2021 sheetload of cards, and it made this fun little fun fold card, and I did make 12 of those. That's what the sheetload made. And then I moved into I did some more cards, and I think I may have done these for 10 on the 10th. Because I knew I wasn't going to use the glitter pattern so much for some of the other projects I wanted to use. So I did another 12 cards. This time I used Call Me Crafty Owl's August 2019 sheetload of cards sketch. And I altered it a little bit. She has a pointed banner and I did a fishtail banner. But that was a quick way to use up a lot of the glitter patterns that I had. So next I made a mini album. It's not mini, but I mean it is a smaller scrapbook. And I used, actually I don't think I did. I think this is the papers glued back to back, and it kind of made them a little bit stronger because this pattern here was the double-sided pattern and it was thicker. And so, and I glued, there's an envelope in the middle. It is a envelope album as well. So I think my covers are just made gluing the paper to either side of the envelope, and that actually made it fairly stiff. And I did the envelope method, where you tuck the flaps of one envelope into another envelope, and that kind of makes your binding. And then I did cover it with some kind of a wider twill ribbon that I had that I coffee dyed. So then here on the front, I fussy cut out a Santa from one of the large 12x12 images, glued him on, and then just added a stamped banner here, and then a stamped word down here just to kind of bring in some green and break up all of that red. And so then on the inside, I just have kind of a photo mat here, a little journal spot there, and then I fussy cut some of the little holly leaves out. And on this one, I did ink all of the edges with Vintage Photo, I believe. And then this page I kind of left alone just because there was just a lot of detail going on that page as it was. There's some glitter, it looks like layers, but it's just all one page. And then on the inside where the envelope opens up, I have some this one is just a little open the flap, because when I glued this one, it actually glued part of the envelope closed towards the bottom. So that was a little thinner insert. Next page, I pretty much left it alone. The pattern, I did add a little burlap flower that I kind of inked and then added a red button too. There was a white button on there and then a little tag with some ribbon. Here again, this page looks like it's layered, but it's just all part of the paper. But I did add some paper poinsettias down here and then a little banner. The inside of this page is more of a full sheet. And this is just 2 pieces glued together, and then I used my envelope punch board to create the little tab. This one I made a pocket page and just added a couple of strips here, so there's like a little label or journal spot. This was a fussy cut image from the paper. And then I tucked in some of the journal cards. This was actually a card from another collection that I had left over, and it coordinated well enough, so I threw that in. This is just a little, booklet made from one of the patterns, and then a little card mat or photo mat made from one of the paper patterns. This one, again, I mostly left alone, that pretty glittered Mary, and I did add another paper poinsettia down here in this little cluster design that was already on the paper. Another insert, 2 papers glued together. This one I did do a mini waterfall. So I have some off-white lace. It's like a really thin lace trim, narrow, not necessarily thin, narrow lace trim that I had. And then here I just layered up a couple of the patterns, so you can do, it's just a small waterfall. This one over here, I just added a strip to it, and then I have a little tag and a fussy cut Santa. The inside of this one, and then my last set of pages is another pocket page that I added some of that lace trim to, and then some more scraps that I turned into photo spots. And then on the back page here, I just added some strips here at the bottom, one to act as a little journal spot. And then this is a tag that came in a card kit that I think I had picked up somewhere on clearance last year after Christmas. And I had bought it with the intention of using it for Cards for Soldiers, because it was like a basic kit. Like it gave you this and a little sentiment, and it gave you the designed, like the pre-printed cards, and you just stuck them on there. So I was going to use it for that, but I liked the vintage. They already kind of had the vintage image, so I just I coffee dyed them and then inked them, and then added some like kind of raffia, but tiny raffia twine at the top there. And then that is the back. And I took my ruler away to do something else with it. So I will use my trimmer here, because these envelopes were bigger. It's about 6 by 9 is the album size. And I just based it off of, I had some larger white envelopes that I knew I would never use for cards. And that's kind of what I do when I find a good deal on envelopes. If they're not like a normal card size that I would use, then I turn them into envelope albums. So there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 envelopes. So that was fun, and that used up a good bit of paper. And then for the rest of like the full size sheets that I wanted to use, I made myself another December daily. And so it's like a vintage journal style December daily. And I played with some different things that I just wanted to try out on journals that I wanted to try out on myself, not on a journal that I was going to try and sell. So the first thing is I was playing with how to do some creative ways to do covers using some of the items that I already have. And I have a bunch of like big policy envelopes. And so this time I decided to try and use it as a cover. And it worked okay. I did some Mod Podging on it because I did some like decoupage elements. Like on the back side here was the Santa that I tore out of the paper and Mod Podged it on. And then this Santa here that I used on the front of my other album, I cut him out again and Mod Podged him to the front of this album, along with this little label, this little strip that I had cut out of another sheet, and then these doily pieces that were from the pattern paper. And I Mod Podged it instead of glued it, just for the fact that I knew this was going to get a lot of wear opening and closing. And So that was why. And plus I was wanting to see if the Mod Podge also helped stiffen it up. I did not Mod Podge the inside, and maybe I should have. But again, this was just kind of a trial and error, kind of experimenting on one of my own books. And then I did add this green strip, but it was starting to come apart. Like the Mod Podge kind of made it brittle there on the corner. So I took some of that twill ribbon that I had that was whiter, coffee dyed some lace that I had, and then just hot glued that on. I did that after I added my stitching for the binding, and then just glued that on so it covered everything, because no way did I want to try and sew through that. So, and then also something I played with was adding some eyelets here on the front and back cover, because after I had put it together, I realized this was starting to get pretty thick and bulky, and I was going to need a way to keep it closed. And instead of just putting something around it, I just thought I would add some ribbon and I can just tie it off. So that is the cover. And then on the inside, I used just kind of an off-white song or like music page. And so you can already tell I have already used a bunch of this pattern. There were 2 sheets of it in the pad, plus all those extra sheets I had. So here within the journal, I have some pocket pages. This was just from a Christmas card that I tore out and kind of vintaged up with some inks. Another one of those journal cards that was left over, I think it was from a old Simple Stories line. A little tag that I made out of scraps. And this ledger paper was actually in the pad. Here I just added a strip, a fussy or a decorative punch, like a border punch strip, and then with some gold and dark red ribbon over it to make a little tip out there. This was some coffee dyed vellum paper that I made and then just tore it. This page, I did add a little belly band and tuck this in, and I did not ink my pages in this journal just because it was for me, but there was so much that I would have had to ink. It would have taken forever. So here I just took a torn corner that I had, added a fussy cut Santa and a little strip there. This is just a smaller sheet. And so at one point I just kind of went through and added some of the strips that I had in different places. This is just kind of an open pocket here, and this little B word came from, I think, that Simple Stories line. And then I stamped out Mary and added it on there, and then this just tucks in. And then on this paper, I just added a couple of little circles that I had already punched along with a little strip. And then I added a little tip out in here with some of the other scraps that I had. This is just another tip out, and this Be Bright is from the Simple Stories line that I had a few bits left. So this page I tore, and then I just added some strips here to add some depth and some color to that page. More of that coffee dyed vellum. This is just this one tips up. I had these and I don't remember what they were from, but I was like, oh, that like kind of just gives a decorative edge to the papers. And this I made off of a video, one of the videos I had seen, was it Smash That Small Paper Pad? I think somebody had made something similar to it, and so I kind of took it and then just kind of tweaked it to make it fit my album. Just added some strips and then just to cover the outside and some other scraps that I had. Here's a page that opens out. This one I stamped on just to give it a little something down here at the bottom, but then this one I just took paper and put it up the middle. This is a little fussy cut image from the paper. This was a Christmas card that I just cut the front off of and used that. Here I just made a little cluster of scraps and some items that I fussy cut out. This is a cute little jar that I die cut out of. Used some of that paper that I had a whole bunch of, and then some off-white paper, and so then I just kind of inked it all up so it tied together, but I used the off-white for the jar top and then the detailed part for the jar bottom, the main jar part, and then just added that little heart. And that's just kind of a strip that goes across the bottom to ground it all. Here I used this Santa. It's the same Santa that's on the very back here. Used him to get a tip out. This one I just stamped. This is just some old paper that I found in my dad's desk whenever we cleared out his apartment last year. And I just liked the feel of it. And then it was already kind of like that aged manila look. And so then I have just stamped there. This one I added a bunch of little scraps to, and then a stamp that says Christmas. This was part of another Christmas cards. It was like a Courier and Ives image, and I just cut it out and then added it whenever I was coffee dyeing. I just added it to that stash and then glued it down here. This is a little doily that I coffee dyed. Here I just added a strip down the back side of that page. This is just a little corner pocket that I added a scrap tag to. This one is a side tuck spot that I just stuck some of the scraps in. I just added a torn corner up here, just added some torn pieces there. So this was just a great way to use up a whole bunch of the scraps that I had. And then here, another little fussy cut girl from the paper, and then the word joy that I stamped and die cut. This corner pocket was just kind of a torn piece that I had, and then I added a little bit of like some of the other scraps. This I actually stamped. I have a stamp that stamps like little banner pieces with a pattern on it. This is part of a card that was in my mom had saved a bunch of like old antique vintage cards that she had either gotten or found, or that her people in her family had gotten. And this one is actually to my grandma, my dad's mom, from her sister. So that's kind of cool. So I just decided to go ahead and, instead of just saving it in a box where nobody can see it, I decided to incorporate it into this vintage junk journal, since it will be used by me. Just group some scraps here. This is some writing paper that I found actually at a kids consignment sale, but it was like that, kind of like that manila paper, look. So it already looked kind of aged. Just have a tip out there, some scraps up here. This is just a torn piece that I tore around this, it's not really holly, more of a pine tree branch there. Just added some strips here to kind of tuck things under more of the coffee vellum. This was a piece I tore around that Santa to make a corner, and then I made a little folder, like one of those little folders, and I realized I'd never glued these down to make on the outside to make it an actual pocket. But this came from, I don't know where that came from. It was in a stash of stuff that my mother-in-law gave me, and he was kind of vintagey, so I threw him in that coffee that I was using to coffee dye. This is the center of my journal, so I created a pocket and then just added the word holiday, which came from the Simple Stories paper line. And then this is a die cut like chipboard Santa from Hobby Lobby that I threw in the coffee to dye. Just added a scrap here to this side. This is another one of those vintage Christmas cards that my mom had, and it's not actually to anybody. It says it's from Germany, but it doesn't necessarily go with the colors, but I liked the vintage feel of it. More of that vellum here. I just took this fancy label that I had die cut and then turned it into kind of a tuck spot here. Added some scraps to it. Threw some scraps on that page. This one I kept very simple. Just kept the paper plain, other than adding this little cornered piece down here and then one of those paper poinsettias. This is another Courier and Ives image from a Christmas card, and I left it open up at the top so you can tuck underneath it. That writing paper. Here I took some scraps and added it onto this page and then covered it with a ribbon so it makes a tip out. scraps, corner pocket, just papers. This one I layered over where the kind of tip out, the piece that holds the tip out in, just to be different. Made another side pocket, added some scraps, layered on some scraps here and left it open so I can tuck things behind it. This tips out doily. This one I tore around the holly and added that on. This one, I like this page. This was part of the paper. It was like one of the 12 by 12 images. So I cut it off and then punched it out with one of my border punches and then glued it on and used the lace trim to kind of cover where it glues on. So it just makes kind of a fun, fancy tip out here. This time I used ribbon to cover the seam, but it's not a tip out. It's just glued down. This page I left completely alone. Made a little belly band. And this is a double pocket, which doesn't want to come out when it's laid down. And then here I just took this strip that I had left, folded it in half, and created a little booklet. And that's just glued down. Bunch of scraps glued together. This one tips up. So a lot of this is just me just figuring out how I can attach scraps to the page. There's another pocket that I used some ribbon and lace and then made a little bow to go with the green in there. And then just 2 scraps. This one I actually made a little card. And that's it for the journal itself. But then I have all my numbers punched out and ready to go, or I either used there was a page in there that had some numbers on it, and I used some of those scraps. And then I used the 25, that's going to be like my Christmas day. And then the rest of them I just took scraps, punched them, and then added some stamped numbers too. So the numbers are all ready to go. I just didn't want to put them in yet because I have found that kind of limits me. There are some days in December where we don't do much at all, and so it may only take 1 page. There are some days where I have a bunch of pictures and it may take several pages. So I have found it's just better to wait and add them. And so then I just took some of the scraps I had and just I made some cluster embellishments. This is just another one of those tags from the card kit, another jar. This is one that I just stamped. I cut it into like a little doily circle, stamped on it. I have some just plain like journal spots if I need them. I love that little jar, little Christmas jars. So just a whole bunch of, like, this was fun for me. I've always been kind of scared of making embellishments just because I always feel like I don't know what to add together to make an embellishment. And so I realized that there is no right or wrong. It's just whatever you want to put together. So I also just have a bunch of tags, just a bunch of shapes that I cut and can use if I want, and then stamped on some of these little dies and punches. So it was just kind of saving it, figuring I could use these some way. This is a New Year's card. So I figured I could somehow use this at the end of the journal, like to talk about New Year's. That was another vintage card from my mom. And then so yeah. So that used up most of the paper. And I had some glitter paper left. And so I decided to use those. And it's reverse confetti sketch number 27, but instead of a rectangle I used a tag, and then this is one of those tags from that card kit that I bought, and then this is the little sentiment strip that they had included, and it had foam on the back, so I pulled the foam off and then I coffee dyed all of these and then just turned them into cards. I used craft card bases, and there are strips on the inside of them all, so I have several that are that design, and then I had two where I was using up scraps, so I just kind of pieced them together. And that's more of like what this is. And then I have a bunch of variations of the Sunday Sketches number 10. Just trying to use up some of the pieces I had left. So this one goes horizontal, but it's just got some of those pieces layered across each other. I stamped Christmas greetings and used one of those fussy cut little girls from one of the paper patterns. And these are on craft as well. And again, they have paper on the inside. So some of them I did vertically and some of them I did horizontally, just trying to use up the papers and depending on the orientation. And then I also did one scrap card. There was a page of this music note paper, so I kind of used that as my mat, but you don't really see a whole lot of it. It just adds a little bit of a layer effect. And then used some of the rectangles I had left, fussy cut another one of those little characters out, added the Christmas greetings, and then some stars. And then I did one other project, and it is not finished yet because I haven't been able to find the notepad that I want. This is the style of notepad that I want to use. It's one of those multi-pad pads from Dollar Tree, and I know this idea originally came from Lyric Lover Crafts here on YouTube, and she kind of came up with a way to get like 3 notepads out of one of these pads, and this was one of the versions. But I would like to find like a yellow one. Not the only colors I've been able to find lately are pink and blue, and so I wanted a yellow one, like a more neutral something to go on the inside. But basically it goes on the inside, and I know she covered the papers, and once I get yellow, I may just tear this top piece off because I don't have any scraps left to like cover all of the dividers here. And I just took it and made myself the holder, and I did add a couple of pieces of white cardstock on the inside just to make it a little stiffer, but then layered a doily, a circle here, and a tag with a cutout, and that is the notepad holder. And as soon as I find a yellow pad, I can finish that off. So that is everything that I got from my vintage Christmas pad. So sum it up, I got the Christmas journal, the mini album, the notepad holder, 24 card, no, I got more than that, 36 cards, and then the journal embellishments. So I had been saving this pad to do like, you know, something like this with it, or actually in something like this. So this was kind of the main reason that I got the pad out to use for my little Christmas in July. And then, you know, decided to go ahead and make cards with the parts that I knew I wouldn't want to use in journal because the glitter doesn't fold well. So, but that is my Christmas in July projects that I made, and I apologize for not sharing them closer to July because I was done with them. But I love creating journals. Like, I love decorating them and putting the pages together and putting them in order, but I hate sewing them. I hate it. I don't know why. And so this sat on my desk for over a month waiting for me to sew it. So I finally sewed it, got it off my desk, and was able to share these with you. Like, this guy's been done for a long time because I didn't have to sew it. So now everything is finally done. But hopefully you guys got some good ideas. If you have this pad, it's an older My Mind's Eye pad. I don't see a date on it, but I have had it for a while. But it's gorgeous. I loved the pattern. So if you guys happen to have this in your stash or something similar, hopefully you got some ideas on how to use it. And so if you guys enjoyed this video, please would appreciate giving it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, I would love for you to join us. I am always trying to share ways to use up paper pads or collections you have in your stash. That's kind of my goal, is to work through all of my pads and collections, which I will probably never do in this lifetime, but it's fun. It's fun to keep pushing for that goal. So I always try to give a variety of ideas when I share my pad projects, so that it, you know, if you're not a card maker, there are some ideas you can probably use, or if you're a card maker, you know, there's always cards involved as well. But anyway, if you haven't already subscribed, I would love for you to join us, because I have many more pads and collections to use. But I thank you guys so very much for your time. I know this video was a little longer, and I hope you all have a very crafty day.